against Joe Hooker in the aftermath of the defeat at Chancellorsville. In tracing the saga of the high command of the Army of the Potomac, the darkling doldrums of McDowell, McClellan, Pope, Burnside, and Hooker gave way at last to comparatively sunny uplands when George Meade and then U.S. Grant take command. The road from Gettysburg to Appomattox would prove to be marked by brutal casualties and its share of command lapses and blunders in the officer corps. Yet talk of disloyalty and conspiracies and coups to undercut the Army and its generals was largely absent. Politicking would reemerge in securing Lincoln's re-election in 1864, but by this time the Potomac Army had become Mr. Lincoln's Army. The politics were tolerated for a vital cause. The high command that closed the war in April 1865 was a world apart from the high command that opened the war. This had become a largely self-taught army, led by volunteer officers from civilian life. 4 years of fighting cost 21 of its generals their lives, but somehow, through trial and tribulation unimagined, the Army of the Potomac kept its identity and its purpose and its resolution steadfast until final victory. 1. Civil War seems inevitable. General Scott seems to have carte blanche. He is in fact the government, and if his health continues, vigorous measures are anticipated. So wrote Edwin M. Stanton, late Attorney General in James Buchanan's cabinet and future Secretary of War in Abraham Lincoln's cabinet, in a letter to the former president dated May 16, 1861. The subject of this observation was Lieutenant General Winfield Scott, whose arching self-esteem would surely have brought forth an imperial nod of agreement at Stanton's characterization. The notion that General Scott was the government was Stanton's insight that the Army appeared to be the power in the land, or at least in the northern half of the land, and therefore to one and all, Scott, as General-in-Chief, was the Army. In fact, Scott's role during the secession crisis, and now the war crisis, had traced an erratic course. But then Winfield Scott was by nature erratic. His heroics in uniform went back to the battles of Chippewa and Lundy's Lane in the War of 1812, and the regular army he afterward nourished showed its mettle under his brilliant command in the war with Mexico. He was appointed Army General-in-Chief in 1841 and brevetted Lieutenant General in 1855. In the meanwhile, old Fuss and Feathers squabbled publicly with one fellow general or another, ventured disastrously into presidential politics as the Whig Party's candidate in 1852, and in a fit of pique moved Army headquarters from Washington to New York, so he would not have to associate with President Franklin Pierce, who had defeated him so handily. Scott remained implanted in New York during the tenure of Secretary of War Jefferson Davis, with whom he carried on a vitriolic feud. As the election of 1860 approached, the South was swept with blazing pledges of secession and disunion should Abraham Lincoln and the Black Republicans gain the presidency. Because the fatal split of the Democratic Party made that outcome a virtual certainty, General Scott concluded it was time and past time for statesmanship to prevail. He regarded himself, in his 75th year, as a senior statesman. He would offer his thoughts on the impending national crisis. Election Day was November 6th, and on October 29th, Scott presented to President Buchanan his views suggested by the imminent danger of a disruption of the Union by the secession of one or more of the Southern states. He opened with the startling assertion that to save time in making his arguments, he conceded the right of secession, but instantly balanced by the correlative right of the national government to regain its violated territory by force if necessary. This lawyerly stipulation, Scott had briefly been an attorney in the early years of the century, would delight Southern secessionists and dismay Northern Unionists. He warned, should the Union be broken up by whatever political madness may contrive, its fragments could never be reunited except by the laceration and despotism of the sword. Scott's acceptance of the legality of secession revealed political naivete, but his warning of secession's poisonous fruit reflected the reality of war as experienced by the nation's premier warrior. After an excursion into a fantastical alternative,